"Read the verdict," the judge said. The officer smiled. He always smiled. He'd worn that badge for 11 years. He'd sat in this exact courtroom 4 times before, and 4 times he'd walked out a free man. He expected a 5th, but this time, the woman across the room wasn't a scared driver. She wasn't a nervous witness. She wasn't someone he could talk over. She was the judge, and she remembered his name before he ever said it. What happened in the next 20 minutes ended a career that took 11 years to build. But here's what nobody expected. The woman in those robes had been pulled over by this exact officer 9 years earlier, before law school, before the bench, before any of it. He didn't recognize her. Not yet. She recognized him immediately. Stay with this one, because what she does next isn't revenge. It's something far more dangerous for a man who thought his badge made him bulletproof. It's patience. 9 years before that courtroom moment, a 26-year-old woman named Renee Calloway sat in the driver's seat of a beat-up Honda Civic, hands shaking on the wheel. She was a 3rd-year law student, broke, exhausted, working 2 jobs to pay for a degree nobody in her family had ever gotten. One at a diner that closed past midnight, another grading undergraduate essays for a professor who barely remembered her name. She drove a car with a cracked taillight she couldn't afford to fix yet. The same car that had carried her through 3 years of late-night study sessions and early morning shifts. That cracked taillight was the reason Officer Daniel Voss pulled her over that night. Voss was 34, confident, the kind of officer other officers called old school, meaning he did things his way, and nobody questioned it. Younger officers on his shift learned to imitate his tone, his posture, the way he made a routine stop feel like a standoff. He had a record of complaints filed against him, 11 to be exact. Every single one dismissed, filed away, forgotten by everyone except the people who'd lived through them. He walked up to Renee's window that night with his hand resting on his holster, not because he needed to, but because he liked how it made people sit up straighter. "License and registration," he said. Not a request, a command. Renee handed them over with trembling fingers. She wasn't scared of getting a ticket. She was scared of him, the way his eyes scanned her car like he was looking for a reason, any reason, to escalate. What she didn't know was that Voss had already decided how this stop would end, before he ever reached her window. He claimed he smelled something. He claimed her hands were moving suspiciously. He ordered her out of the car on a public road, at night, alone, for a broken taillight. Cars passed slowly, headlights sweeping over her as she stood there. Every one of them a witness who kept driving. Renee complied. Law students learn fast that compliance keeps you alive. But compliance didn't stop him from making her stand on the curb for 40 minutes while he searched her car without her consent, pulling apart her glove box, her backpack full of casebooks, her gym bag, looking for anything that would justify what he'd already decided to do. He found nothing, and let her go with a warning he never had the right to issue in the first place. No ticket, no report, no record, except the one burned into her memory. She drove home that night, with her hands still trembling on the wheel, replaying every second, wondering what would have happened if she'd said the wrong thing, moved the wrong way, breathed at the wrong moment. She didn't cry until she got inside her apartment. Then she sat on her kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, and made herself a promise. She wrote his name down. She wrote the date. She wrote everything she could remember, the exact words he used, the exact time on the dashboard clock, the badge number she'd memorized while standing on that curb, in case she ever needed it. She tucked the paper into a folder she kept for the rest of her life, moving it from apartment to apartment, never once throwing it away. What she didn't know that night was how long she'd have to wait, or how much patience the wait would demand of her. She finished law school 18 months later, studying late into the night, between shifts, fueled by gas station coffee and a kind of anger that never burned out. It just got quieter, more focused, more useful. She passed the bar on her first attempt. She spent 6 years as a public defender, then a prosecutor, learning exactly how the system worked from every possible angle, including the angles that let men like Voss slip through, again and again, year after year, complaint after complaint, with nothing ever sticking. She watched other officers like him walk free in courtroom after courtroom. She watched victims get talked over, dismissed, disbelieved. Every single time, she thought about that curb on Hollis Avenue. Every single time, it made her better at her job. And then, it all changed. She was appointed to the bench. Judge Renee Calloway had been on the bench for 2 years when Daniel Voss's case landed on her docket. He was being tried for excessive force, the 5th complaint to actually reach a courtroom in his career. The other 4 buried in settlements and paperwork. This time, a bystander's phone camera had caught what his body camera malfunctioned and failed to record. Judge Renee Calloway had been on the bench for 2 years when Daniel Voss's case landed on her docket. He was being tried for excessive force, the 5th complaint to actually reach a courtroom in his career. The other 4 buried in settlements and paperwork. This time, a bystander's phone camera had caught what his body camera malfunctioned and failed to record. Beat 1. Recognition. When Voss walked into the courtroom for the pre-trial hearing, he glanced at the judge's bench the way he always did. Quick, dismissive, just checking who'd be signing off on his usual outcome. He'd been in front of judges before. He knew the rhythm. Walk in confident, answer in short, clean sentences. Let the uniform do the talking. It had worked for over a decade. He didn't recognize her, but she recognized him the second he walked through those doors. Same walk, same smirk, same hand resting near his belt, like he still needed people to notice it. 9 years had sharpened her memory instead of dulling it. She could still hear the exact tone of his voice ordering her out of the car. 9 years had passed. She had changed everything about her life. He hadn't changed anything about his. She said nothing. Not yet. Voss's lawyer moved for the case to be dismissed on a technicality, claiming the bystander video had a broken chain of custody. It was a maneuver that had worked for Voss before. 3 other judges had let it slide without a second thought, eager to clear their dockets, eager to avoid the headache of fighting a police union with deep pockets and longer memories. Your Honor, the defense attorney said, this footage cannot be verified as unaltered. Judge Calloway didn't answer right away. She looked at the footage request sitting in front of her. She looked at the 11 prior complaints in his personnel file, the ones she'd requested, pulled the moment she saw his name on her docket. The same file that had sat untouched in a records office for nearly a decade, gathering dust, gathering nothing. Counsel, she finally said, I'd like to see the full footage, unedited. Today, the courtroom shifted. That wasn't supposed to happen. Cases like this got quietly trimmed down before they ever reached this stage. Voss's smile faded, just slightly, just enough. 3 weeks later, the full trial began. Day after day, Judge Calloway sat through testimony from the bystander, from the victim, from 2 officers who quietly admitted, under oath, for the first time in their careers, that Voss had a pattern they all noticed and never reported. They described the same hand-on-the-holster habit, the same need to escalate stops that should have ended in seconds. Nobody had ever written it down before. Now it was on the record, permanently. Then Voss took the stand himself. I followed procedure, he said, voice steady, practiced. I've always followed procedure. Judge Calloway looked down at her notes. Then she looked up. Officer Voss, she said, calm, measured. Do you recall a traffic stop on Hollis Avenue 9 years ago? A young woman, a broken taillight, a search without consent. The room went still. Voss blinked. I don't recall every stop, Your Honor. I've made thousands. You wouldn't, she said. But she does. She paused. Let it sit. Let every person in that courtroom feel the weight of what she said next. The court reporter's hands hovered over the keys, waiting. That woman was me. Voss's face changed color. His lawyer's pen stopped moving. The court reporter's fingers froze mid-keystroke. I'm not recusing myself, Judge Calloway continued, voice never rising, never breaking. Because what happened to me 9 years ago has no bearing on the facts of this case. The video evidence does. The testimony does. Your record does. And Officer Voss, your record speaks far louder than you ever let it. The courtroom didn't move. Nobody breathed. Somewhere in the back row, a court sketch artist's pencil hovered, forgotten. over an unfinished line. You could feel, in that room, 11 years of unchecked power, meeting one woman who had spent 9 of those years building the exact tools to hold it accountable. Not with anger, not with vengeance, with patience, paperwork, and the kind of quiet discipline that nobody sees coming until it's already too late to stop. The verdict came 4 days later. 4 days of deliberation. 4 days of the city quietly watching. 4 days of Voss going home each night to a house that suddenly felt smaller than it used to. Guilty on 2 counts of excessive force. Guilty on falsifying a police report. The jury, not Judge Calloway, reached that verdict. She made sure of that. She never let her own history touch the scales. She just made sure the truth had nowhere left to hide. That every piece of evidence got the full light it deserved instead of the quiet dismissal it always used to get. When the verdict was read, Voss didn't smile this time. He sat there, badge already stripped, staring at the same bench he used to walk past without a second glance. The same confidence that had carried him through 11 dismissed complaints had nowhere left to go. His lawyer leaned over to whisper something. Voss didn't respond. He just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, the silence of the courtroom pressing down on him, in a way handcuffs hadn't yet. Judge Calloway delivered the sentencing herself. Her voice didn't shake. It hadn't shaken in years. "Mr. Voss," she said, "no longer officer. 11 complaints were filed against you before this trial. 11 people who were told their experiences didn't matter enough to investigate. 11 people who went home that night and wondered if anyone would ever believe them." She paused. "I was the 12th. I just took longer to be heard." The gallery was silent. A few people in the back row, community members who's shown up out of curiosity, were openly crying. Not out of sadness, out of something closer to relief. Because for once, the system didn't fail the way it always had. Here's the meaning moment, the part you can't scroll past. Renee Calloway never set out to punish one man for what he did to her 9 years earlier. She set out to become someone the system couldn't dismiss, someone who would read every file, watch every piece of footage, and ask the questions that should have been asked 11 complaints ago. The badge didn't make Voss untouchable. It just delayed the moment someone untouchable, by him, finally sat across the room, holding the one thing he never expected to face, a record as long as his, and the patience to use it. This is the part of the story people forget when they imagine justice as a single dramatic moment. It isn't. It's 9 years of showing up, studying, working double shifts, and refusing to let one bad night define the rest of a life. The courtroom moment only happened because of everything that happened long before it. Quietly, unnoticed, far from any camera. That image, calm, composed, finally vindicated, is the freeze frame the whole story builds toward. Not anger, not triumph, just quiet, earned peace. She didn't need to remind the courtroom who she used to be. The verdict did that for her. After everything Renee went through, the fear on that curb at 26, the years of building a career nobody handed her, the long nights of studying, with no guarantee any of it would matter, and the moment she finally sat across from the man who once made her feel powerless, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. The people we dismiss today might be the ones holding the gavel tomorrow. So tell me, has there ever been a moment in your life where you felt completely powerless, only to come back stronger years later? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and these stories matter more than you know. If this story moved you even a little, hit subscribe. Not for us, but for the next person whose story deserves to be told with this much care. And if you felt something watching this one, wait until you see what happens when a billionaire goes undercover as his own employee. That story is coming next.